everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this is the iPhone 16 Pro Max. This is my main phone that I've been using for the last week and a half or so, and I actually chose the black color this year. The overall look is not too much different from what we had last year, and so the feel in your hand is very much similar, but there's a slight difference. Maybe it feels softer, maybe it has to do with the texture on it, but something is definitely a little bit different. It's slightly taller as well, with the screen being 6.9 inches, and it definitely feels a little bit bigger when you're holding onto it compared to the previous generation. I've shown this before. If you place an iPhone 15 Pro Max in an iPhone 16 Pro Max case, it will actually just fall right out. So it's definitely something that they've increased the size of a little bit, and so many people are opting for the smaller 16 Pro this year. I still prefer the Max. I can wrap my hand around it, and it seems to work fine for me. But I thought we'd talk about all the other things that go along with it and whether or not you should actually upgrade this year. So when it comes to the display, it's the same display basically, but just slightly larger with thinner bezels. Now the bezels are barely noticeable this year. So if you're looking at the bezel and maybe you're side by side with a 15 Pro Max, you may or may not be able to tell. It's very minimal, the overall change there. And the glass this year is supposedly a better version of Ceramic Shield that's 50% stronger than the original version. So how much stronger it is than last year's version, we don't really know. Now with the 15 Pro Max, I noticed I had a lot more scratches after a year than I did with the 14 Pro Max. Both I did not use a screen protector with, so how well this Ceramic Shield actually holds up on the 16 Pro Max is a little bit hard to say, and we'll have to check back after a year or so. We definitely have PWM this year. It's the same display basically as last year, just slightly larger, but the overall PWM seems to be high enough that it doesn't bother my eyes, and you can see this at 240 frames per second. However, in this video, you can actually see it on the settings screen in some shots where there's sort of scrolling bars that go up and down. So it's definitely still there, and if you're sensitive to this, it's something that will still bother you, unfortunately. Now the main change on the outside of the phone obviously is the new camera control. This is a new button that you can press, you can half press, you can double half press, or you can slide back and forth. It's actually a physical button you can press down and it opens the camera right away. It can be turned off or changed to open your favorite app, and so in that way it's pretty helpful that you can quickly open up everything very fast. However, I'm not really sure that I find it very useful. In fact, when I press the button, I find that yes, I can get into the camera quickly, but when I press it again, it causes a shake on the phone that causes it sort of basically to give me a blurry photo most of the time. It's better for me just to press on the display itself, then I get a clear photo. It's where I want to focus. Now, supposedly in a future update, we're going to have a half press camera shutter. So basically we can press to focus, press again, and then take the photo similar to what we have with a regular camera. Once that feature is available, this would be more useful for me. The other area I actually find this useful is when I zoom. I can smoothly zoom in and out using the camera control, and that's probably the most useful thing. I don't really use it for anything else, and I don't think I'll continue to use it for anything else other than to quickly open the camera and if I want to zoom. Otherwise, I'll just use the on-screen controls. One thing I do like this year with camera control are the new tone settings. Apple's sort of overall processing to me was a bit flat. They sort of just brighten everything, make it very vibrant, and that's nice for some things, but sometimes you want to bring back some of those shadows, contrast, and just have a look that you prefer. I actually sort of customize this myself, and the setting that I'm using sort of brings back a little bit of shadows in the background, a little contrast, makes it sort of pop a little bit more, and I think that looks a lot better. And I'm glad that you can set that as a standard option within your camera controls. So that's something that if you want it just to be the default sort of setting, you don't have to apply it every single time, but you can if you want, or you could change it every single time. Also, the placement of the camera control is a little odd. I think it's good if you're holding it vertically. Maybe you're going to use this with Apple Intelligence later on to take a photo of something and then have it tell you what it is. But when you're holding it this way, I find the overall placement to be a little bit odd for me. It's covering the display, it's covering the corners of the display as I'm using it, and it's just not something I find valuable. I'll continue to use the on-screen controls and wait to see if they update it, and the overall press and feel of it just doesn't feel right to me. There's something a little bit off that doesn't feel perfected yet like Apple typically has with their buttons and on-screen controls. So maybe this will be updated with the next update. We'll have to wait and see. This year, the rear cameras get another upgrade. We have the new 48 megapixel Fusion camera. It's definitely a little bit better, especially for video. And then we have an ultra wide that's 48 megapixels. This really helps with things such as macro, but I think with regular ultra wide photos, you're not going to notice a difference. But when you're close up, maybe filming video, it makes a difference. And we have 4K 120. You can record 4K 120 all day long. It doesn't seem to overheat the phone, and it will just work as you would think. Hit the button, 4K 120, and then you can actually change it after the fact to 24, 30, 60, or 120 frames per second. Now, it takes up a tremendous amount of space, and you can even do that in ProRes or ProRes Log on an external drive. So if you want ProRes in 120, you can record it externally with something such as this Samsung drive, and then just plug it into your computer and edit it after the fact. If you want slow motion, you want high-speed footage or something like that, you have that option. And that's something we don't really see even from professional cameras. 4K 120 without overheating, something that's pretty impressive, but you will need a lot of storage space if you plan to use that. Now, the front-facing camera isn't really any different this year. In fact, I'm recording this entire video using an iPhone 16 Pro Max. Anytime I'm on screen, I'm using the forward-facing camera. The rear camera is used for everything else. And while the camera in the front isn't any different, the microphones are super impressive. In fact, there's 4 different options now that we have 4 microphones. So we have a standard mode, an in-frame mode. We also have a studio mode and a cinematic mode. So studio sort of is the one I like the most. It sort of isolates it, makes it sound like you're in a studio. Cinematic brings in some of the environment a little bit better. Maybe some of the birds in the background you may have already heard, things like that. However, it does degrade the overall quality of the sound a little bit, so it's something that's sort of a trade-off, of course, with anything, but the regular microphone itself works really great, and I'm not using any external mic. I'm not using any of those DJI mics or a lav mic or an overhead shotgun mic or anything like that. It's just the microphones from the iPhone, and I think it's pretty impressive. Now, battery life this year definitely seems a little bit better. My 15 Pro Max running the same version of iOS was not really getting me through the day. Now, I do run a lot of betas, and that can affect that, of course, but the new phone, it's getting me through the day. By the time I go to bed, sometimes I have about 40% of my battery. Typically, with the 15 Pro Max, I was charging it sometime toward the end of the day just to make sure I could get through the day until I get to bed. So it does have a little increase there. It's not as huge as I would like. Maybe some optimization with the software will help with that, but at this point, it's definitely an increase. Not huge, maybe in 1 to 2 hours over the 15 Pro Max, but definitely a little bit better and nice just to have. Now, every year we get a new iPhone, we get a new processor. This year we have the A18 Pro, and just from initial use, it feels about the same. Now, technically, using Geekbench scores, it's much faster, and it's definitely more capable. Basically, we've got a much faster neural engine, we have faster processors, and doing regular tasks feels about the same. But if you were to export video, do something along those lines, whether it's Final Cut, LumaFusion, or rather iMovie on iPhone, you're going to notice a difference there as far as the overall export times. Also, when you're maybe doing some neural engine related tasks, you would see a difference. However, Apple Intelligence is really what's going to utilize that, and we don't have it yet. So I think we're not fully utilizing the processor, but the good thing is Apple seems to have fixed some of the thermal issues, so there's no overheating. It seems to handle that well, and the same is true when charging. I noticed when I placed it on my wireless charger in my car next to my 15 Pro Max for the same amount of time, the 15 Pro Max overheated, the 16 Pro Max did not, and it was in a case as well. So they've definitely fixed a lot of those thermal issues this time around. Now, along with that new processor, we get different wireless options. We have Wi-Fi 7, which definitely is super fast. I noticed that at home right away. I'm getting 1,000 down wireless, no problem whatsoever, but you do need a Wi-Fi 7 router. We also have an updated 5G modem this time around, and it does seem to be a little bit better. In fact, I was part of the area that was hit by the latest hurricane, and it went to SOS. However, I was able to grab signal in areas I probably wouldn't have been able to with my iPhone 15 Pro Max. It seemed like I'd have one bar, it would work a little bit. Of course, I had satellite SOS, which was great if I had to use it, but if I drove to the next town over, I actually had signal, thankfully. So we weren't hit as hard as many other areas that are still needing a lot of help. So this actually really helped. I'm glad I had it, and I'm glad I had the satellite option if I had needed it. But the overall connectivity seems to be a little bit better. Phone calls stay connected, they're not dropping for me, and Wi-Fi definitely seems better and faster speeds just from using it regularly. Now, I wanted to mention Apple Intelligence a little bit. Now, by the time you're watching this video, it could already be on your iPhone 15 Pro and newer. However, Apple said the iPhone 16 at launch was designed specifically for Apple Intelligence. However, it's not out yet. But they actually have the Fifth Avenue Apple Store lit up like the Siri animation, and many of the demos in the store have this, as well as some of the signage in the store says iPhone 16, Hello Apple Intelligence. To me, this is a bit misleading and very un-Apple-like, and something that won't matter in a month or two, but basically Apple either should have waited to launch this and had Apple Intelligence ready to go, or just not had the same signs up that sort of said that it was out. I've had numerous people ask me, where's the Siri animation? Or where's Apple Intelligence? Or how do I use it? And so it's not clear for, I think, the average consumer that doesn't run betas on their phone or follow maybe iOS updates to know that this is not out yet. So that's something that I think was a bit disappointing to me personally. Won't be a huge deal in the long run, but hopefully Apple doesn't continue this trend in the future. I understand it takes a long time to work on software, but this was something that was a little unexpected and I think a little misleading to certain consumers. So hopefully most people can just be patient and wait for it, but I just thought it was a little odd this year. So if you're wondering if you should upgrade to an iPhone 16 Pro Max, it really comes down to about 4 different factors. First one is battery life. If you care most about battery life, well, the iPhone 16 Pro Max has the best battery life of any iPhone. If you care about the camera, well, we have great upgraded cameras as well as camera control. If you think you're going to use this button all the time, customize it, change things with it, you'll really appreciate this upgrade. If you also want a bigger display, well, that's a reason to upgrade. It's slightly larger. And then finally is Apple Intelligence. Apple Intelligence is only on the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. So you'll need an iPhone 16 or newer or a 15 Pro or 15 Pro Max to run it. And without that, you won't be able to unless you have an iPad with an M1 or a Mac with an M1 and later. So those are really the main factors. If you're upgrading from an iPhone 10, 10s, 10R, iPhone 11, iPhone 12, it's definitely a significant upgrade. But if you're coming from a 14 or 15, it's going to feel very familiar. It basically feels like a 15S to me, but that's because, well, I've used all of the phones and it feels like a slight difference as far as just the regular day-to-day use. But I do appreciate the small changes, and as phones sort of mature and there isn't much more to change, well, it's a nice upgrade to have, but it probably will last a couple years for most people. So hopefully that helps you decide in your decision to upgrade to the iPhone 16 Pro, 16 Pro Max, or even the iPhone 16. I'd love to hear if you actually picked one up, what color you chose, or if you're going to hold off maybe for another year and see what we have with next year's iPhone 17. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.